I want to start with Project Veritas, right? Facebook insider leaks. Zuckerberg, Facebook execs admit Facebook has too much power and that they want to work with the Biden administration. This is Gateway pundit Christina Layla. This actually came out on January 31st, but I found that as the days roll by, some articles from a day or two or three ago take on new relevance. You know, in this gig, it's not always best to jump right on the headlines, right? You got so many people that just follow the headlines. They don't put a lot of their own unique thought into it. I want to give you the best of both worlds, right? This isn't a news show. This is an entertainment show, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to give you the real news. I'm going to fact check everything as best I can within the scope of our researchers and our company. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand this stuff. You have to hear about this stuff. And if I can give it to you in a way that makes it go down with a spoonful of sugar, then I am, because I would much rather you get it somehow than not get it at all, if that makes sense. All right. This is important. It's very important to know what these big tech companies, these social media companies are doing. It's important to understand what they do to us as a culture and what their main motivation is. Folks, what the main motivation of every bad guy is. You've seen the movies. You've seen the TV shows. Every bad guy wants something that leads to the one main thing. Whether it's money, whether it's this or that, it all leads to this main thing. They all want power. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Power. Big secret, right? Not hard to understand, not hard to figure out, not rocket science, not Dane Burgery, brain surgery, Schrain-Burgery, however you want to call it, whatever mix and match people like to put to that term. Ladies and gentlemen, let's read. Project Veritas on Sunday night released insider leaked videos of Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and other Facebook execs admitting Facebook has too much power. James O'Keefe and his Project Veritas team have obtained hours of leaked video from a brave insider at Facebook. This person still works at Facebook and is willing to continue exposing Zuckerberg and his organization's corruption. Zuckerberg was caught on video discussing President Trump's last few weeks in office. The president intends to use his remaining time in office to undermine the peaceful and lawful transition of power. That is a quote from Zuckerberg. By the way, who is Zuckerberg to make this decision, right? Who the hell is he to judge what he thinks or doesn't think the president is doing? I get it. He's the CEO of his company, but this is a company literally looking to affect politics. All right. Power, ladies and gentlemen, power. Plain and simple. Mark Zuckerberg is not a robot. In fact, he's the builder of the evil robots. You know, people look at the guy, right? They look at this guy, and I'm scrolling up here for those that are listening on Apple and other like Spotify, Google Podcasts, all those good places. I'm looking at a picture from Project Veritas of the Facebook symbol with Mark Zuckerberg next to it. And yeah, I get it. He looks like an alien. He looks like the little, for those of you, I'm going to age myself here. You remember the movie Mac and Me from the 80s with the little alien who used to drink Coca-Cola out of the straw? That's what he looks like. In fact, I'm going to do a favor. All right. I know there's a lot of folks out there that are a little older, a little younger. They're in the mix. I'm like right in the center there, right about to be an old man, but almost there, not quite there yet, but it's right. It's right there. I could smell the oldness of myself walking in the room. I'm not going to lie. I'm old as dirt, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm going to Google this, or actually, sorry, I'm going to DuckDuckGo this. Check this out. This is Mac and Me from the 80s. Oh yeah. We're totally going to go. Yep. You see that guy? That is 80s graphics right there before CGI. Look at this thing. Right? Look at that thing. That, my friends, could totally be Mark Zuckerberg, proving that he's actually a space alien. No, Mark Zuckerberg's actually a piece of trash. He's some kid that invented a program in college that would rate how hot the chicks were that he wanted to do because he was a full-on geek and couldn't get laid. Sorry, not sorry. Sorry for the language. I hate to upset anybody who has a language filter early on. I am a sailor. I do apologize about that. But folks, understand that's what this guy is. So he's smart. He's a genius. He didn't have to learn to code. He knows the code. He probably wrote a lot of the code, but I'll tell you, that's how he started. Homeboy just wanted to rate chicks on college and turned that into Facebook as he went on. So now the guy that creates an app, the guy that is partially or fully or whatever responsible. I don't follow Mark Zuckerberg's life. I'm not his keeper. I don't clean up after him. I don't take his trash out. He can kiss my ass. This man thinks that he runs the government. We're going to keep reading. Zuckerberg said he wants to work with the Biden administration. President Biden already issued a number of executive orders on areas that we as a company care quite deeply about and have for some time. Areas like immigration, preserving DACA, ending restrictions on travel from Muslim-majority countries, as well as executive orders on climate and advancing racial justice and equity. I think these were all important and positive steps. So you might be asking yourself, what the hell does Mark Zuckerberg have to do with any of this? He runs an internet company, right? A company that puts people together on social media, a company that's supposed to not have bias. Why would he care about this? Folks, we've talked about the fact that I'm a PhD student for business management and I have an MBA. I'm not saying that to rub anything in anyone's faces. I want you to know that I didn't go back to school till I was almost 30 years old. All right. And the military paid for that. I would have never, ever gone to college if it wasn't for the military, nor would I have ever had the confidence to believe I could make it through college. I barely graduated high school. All right. So I don't want you to think anything of me for saying that. I want to tell you that I value my street smarts much more than my college smarts, but the combination of both is pretty lethal, if you know what I mean. So what I'm saying with that is I want to tell you about a term that I know a lot about. I want to tell you about a theory that I know a lot about. It's called corporate social responsibility, CSR. And it's a theory that came out back in the day and it has gone rampant. You mix that like a cocktail with a little of this Marxist juju juice, and I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you, it makes for one deadly brainwashing concoction. I want to show you. Let's look at Mac and me one more time. He's pretty funny. Folks, for those listening, when I showed the picture of Mac and me, I just want you to think Mark Zuckerberg, but like a Muppet alien with a pot belly and like pointy, basically the exact same thing, but with 80s animation. Anyway, let's look this up really quick so you'll see what I'm talking about. This is corporate, not customer, corporate social responsibility. Boom. Corporate social responsibility. We'll just go right to Investopedia. What is corporate social responsibility? This is updated February 2nd, 2021, yesterday. What is corporate social responsibility? Corporate social responsibility is a self-regulating business model that helps a company be socially accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and the public. By practicing corporate social responsibility, also called corporate citizenship, companies can be conscious of the kind of impact they're having on all aspects of society, including economic, social, and environmental. To engage in CSR means that in the ordinary course of business, a company operating in ways that enhance society and the environment, instead of contributing negatively to them. All right. This is a way for how the company operates. They say that a company is supposed to make society better. This started with environmental regulations. You know how companies would get called out for too much toxic gas and things like that. And it evolved into this. Well, here is what it really is. I've talked to a ton of CEOs. Come on, I'm doing a freaking dissertation for a PhD in business management. And guess what my concentration is, folks? My area of study is entrepreneurial studies, which means that I talk to entrepreneurs, which means that I've talked to a lot of CEOs. CEOs use CSR to make more money. That's it. That's where it started. Hey, if the public thinks that our company is better and cooler than your company, public's going to pay us more money. That's where it all comes from. That's what it is, folks. That's the dirty truth. And so that, you mix that with a little bit of Karl Marx. Oh, man, that's like Ghostbusters when they put the slime in the toaster and turn the music on and the toaster starts dancing. Yeah. CSR and Marxism are bad news. And that is what's been fueling all of this crap for years and years. You are seeing the tail end of the evolution of corporate social responsibility mixed with this fucking, sorry guys. I'm working so hard to control my language. That's one thing that I've been working on for months and months and months, trying to not let the curse words slip out. I'm not going to edit that out. I'm holding myself accountable. I know that you guys like me raw and uncensored, but I try to control that as much as I can just to make sure I can give a bit of myself to everybody. You know, there are some folks that just get real offended with curse words and they're on the right too. And I know everybody wants to be a part of their own tribe, but remember, the left, from the rich elites all the way to the socialists, when it's time to fight, they put all their differences aside and they unite together. And so whether it offends you that other people get offended by cussing, whether it doesn't offend you, whether, you know, you're super religious, whether you're not, we all have to work together in our goals, ladies and gentlemen. I would much rather bicker with you about your beliefs on cursing and your beliefs on the legalization of marijuana than have to fight off a communist revolution in this country. Wouldn't you? Think about that. Think about that. Aren't our problems, the things that we bicker about, the things that we don't agree on, aren't they so small and minuscule compared to, say, corporate social responsibility and companies teaming with elites to screw and crush us? If anything, us little people on the left and the right, instead of fighting each other, we really have something in common here, because the elites and these big businesses, they don't give a crap what side you're on. They just want to have their party on your back. Plain and simple, folks. Plain and simple. Look, Zuckerberg had said this, right? He put out there that they agree with the executive orders. They agree with DACA. They agree with the climate change stuff and the racial justice and equity stuff and all the, you know, all the things that are going to crush the economy and hurt people. Remember, folks, in communist Russia, business still get paid. So when people ask me, oh, why would a company hurt itself? Well, if our government turns into a socialist nightmare, Facebook will still get paid. Trust me. Quote, we also have the first woman and the first person of color as our vice president in the history of our country. The swearing in of Vice President Harris really stands as a reminder that despite the challenges that we are facing at a country, we all have so much to be proud of, like a woman who, screws a married guy and gets appointed to her first post. Of course, though, in 2021, they just call that a woman doing what she has to do. If a guy did that, he'd be a sexual abuser and he'd be canceled and put in jail in 2021. But hey, double standards aren't a thing, are they? Folks, Kamala Harris, right? They want to turn this into a race thing. Kamala Harris, we don't care if a black woman or a black man or a Spanish American woman or man or Mexican American woman. We don't care if any of those folks become elected officials, vice presidents, whatever. All we care about is that they are qualified and have what's best in mind for Americans. All right? Plain and simple. Americans for both cities and rural areas. That's the problem. It's not being addressed. And unfortunately, people are now learning too late what Joe Biden really stands for, ladies and gentlemen, what he really stands for. Facebook's not only a publisher. They've given Dems free advertising space by shadow banning and censoring conservatives while boosting Democrats. Guys, my Twitter never, ever got over about 200 followers. They shadow banned me way back in the day. Way back in the day. I don't even have to post stuff. Let me put this like this, right? You have the American Reveille LLC. That's the company's name on paper. Small business, disabled veterans, small business, all kinds of stuff. We're certified up the wazoo. And we're certified as a media management production company, which means, right, that we aren't the news, though we do have some stuff involving the news, right? I have an excuse to put out the content however I would like, because we seek to enlighten, to empower, and to entertain. Facebook doesn't care. If they deem you fake news, regardless of if it's true or not, they cut your distribution. Same with Twitter. Twitter does the same thing. So if I share one video, like the video you're seeing now, that's it. You're done. Twitter makes you go bye-bye. So, folks, I can attest to that. I can attest to that all day, and I know dozens and dozens and dozens of other influencers and people that can attest to it as well. Facebook censors political speech, promotes far-left partisan objectives while enjoying the protections under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Zuckerberg has repeatedly testified to Congress that Facebook does not censor or police political speech. All right, folks, we need to watch this together. Now, you can go to Project Veritas, right? They have an email here if you work for Facebook, by the way. But Project Veritas has a website. I forgot exactly where it is. You can just come to Gateway Pundit and find this article and go from there. But there's actually hours of this. There's hours of him talking. But this is some of the juicy stuff, all right? So, folks, without further ado, this is Mark Zuckerberg speaking the truth. They got some good video, folks, over at Project Veritas.
In his first day, President Biden already issued a number of executive orders on areas that we as a company really care quite deeply about.
But there has been quite a lot of disquiet expressed by many leaders around the world, from the President of Mexico to Alexander Navalny in Russia, and Chancellor Angela Merkel, and others saying, well, this shows that private companies have got too much power and they should be only making these decisions in a way that is framed by democratically agreed rules. We agree with that. We agree with that. Mark has been very clear about that ideally we wouldn't be taking these decisions on our own.
You see what he's saying? Ideally. This is going to end up being their get out of jail card down the road. Right? They're basically all saying that, yes, we do have this power, but we shouldn't have it. And it's not our fault that we have it. It's the government's fault. This is the blame game, right? We're going to wield this mighty weapon, right? Imagine being like an ancient Greek and the gods send down a sword from the sky, a flaming sword, and you smite down your enemies with this flaming sword. And then Zeus comes down and says, how could you have killed all these people? And you drop the sword and you say, oh, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't make the sword. I didn't give the sword its power. That was you, Zeus. That was you guys. That was the gods. It wasn't me. I'm just the messenger. I'm just doing the dirty work, but I didn't start this. That's what they're saying. No, Nick Clegg, head of global affairs for Facebook. No, Mr. Zuckerberg, you are the owners of said flaming sword.
We'll be taking these decisions in line with and in conformity with democratically agreed rules and principles. And at the moment, those democratically agreed rules don't exist. We still have to take decisions in real time.
So they don't exist because nobody in Washington can get their act together because they're all bought and sold. Folks, come on. The Democrats want these platforms to censor more, right? And half the Republicans are rhinos that have companies paying them where Facebook and Twitter are in their best interest. So they're not doing anything either. Come on. You really think we're going to listen to Lindsey Graham now or Liz Cheney? You really think we give a crap what they have to say? You really think we believe them? Come on. Come on. The next time I take a quick editing break in this video, because there are certain points that I do break up the video so that we can put in small edits if need be, I'm going to shut the notifications off on these phones. I'm so sorry, guys. It usually doesn't go off this much. I usually have them somewhere else. So I actually, if you really want to laugh because of the business, I'm going to give you a little inside. You see that? That's called 3 cell phones, ladies and gentlemen. I have 3 cell phones with what we do here. So you can imagine it's absolutely swamped. And those things are just bring, 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 bring all day. All day. All right. But let's get back to this for a second. What I'm going to say is that they are pointing the blame on Washington, right? We're all fighting each other in these weird different ways. We're pointing at the social media companies. Social media companies are pointing at Washington, and Washington's pointing back at us saying, no, you need to be regulated. Folks, the real problem is Washington. It is the elites. It is the system. And no, it's not systemic racism, because if you really want to talk about that, and that's a whole other video, systemic racism is actually coming from the left. They're being racist against the entire population of 80 million Americans that voted for Donald Trump. But no, folks, what's systemic in our government is a lack of ownership, a lack of accountability, and a lack of honor. We're talking about dozens and 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 dozens. And I could just keep saying dozens, but that's how many people in Washington and in the deep state. That's what you want to call it, the swamp, however you want to call it. There's just dozens of them, hundreds, if you want to add up the dozens, that literally care nothing more than to line their pockets and do what they're told, not by the American people, not by you and me, but by companies like Facebook.
We have a system that is able to freeze commenting on threads in cases where our systems are detecting that there may be a thread that has hate speech or violence sort of in the comments. These are all things we've built over the past 3-4 years as part of our investments into the integrity space or efforts to protect elections.
I wonder whether or not we can use Oculus to help a white police officer understand what it feels like to be a young black man who's stopped and searched and arrested by the police.
I don't know what to say to that comment, because I come from a poor neighborhood and a bad neighborhood, and I've had the knee of a police officer in the back of my neck before. Okay. Isn't Oculus one of the programs they use to follow you like around? Like I heard about Oculus. I may be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Oculus the program that Facebook has, that super secret squirrel program they have where they can actually follow you once you get off Facebook? Like if you go from Facebook to, a porn site, they can watch you. They know you're on that porn site. I mean, and I'm not saying that we should all be going on porn sites. What I'm trying to say is that Facebook has technologies that are far beyond the scope of what's necessary and far beyond the scope of legality, ladies and gentlemen. How about, having technology that shows a young woman what it's like to be a young man and get taken for everything in a divorce? I mean, how far do you want to go with this? However you stretch it, however you put it, whatever spin you put on this, however you try to justify something other than this, all they say is that it's white supremacy and white racism, because at the end of the day, this is an attack on white males, plain and simple. All right. Are there bad white males in this country? Oh, yeah. Are there bad black males too? Oh, yeah. Are there bad Latin Americans? Hell yeah. Are there bad everybody? Everybody, man, woman, black, white, transgender, straight, gay, whatever you are, good and bad in all. If you have an argument against that, if you argue that that's not true because white supremacy is actually a mindset, you are a racist, bigoted piece of shit. That is the official statement from American Reveille, LLC. Deal with it. Plain and simple. Let's watch the rest of this.
And I want every major decision to run through a civil rights lens.
I think that these were all important and positive steps. And I am looking forward to opportunities where Facebook is going to be able to work together with this new administration on some of their top priorities, starting with the COVID response.
Crazy. This isn't uncommon. I work for a large company, and that company's doing very similar things through a civil rights lens. And most of us, we have to pretend or hide our identities or not talk about it if we want to keep our jobs. Nobody has said that, but we know the truth, ladies and gentlemen, and you know the truth where you're working as well. It's very important that you see this stuff. It's very important that you understand the mindset of a Mark Zuckerberg. It's very hard for us to understand. It's very hard for us to wrap our mind around this. All right. I don't make a ton of money. I don't. Maybe one day I will, and that'll be nice. And if I do, I plan on doing a lot of good things, like a lot of these GameStop folks are doing, making that money and helping communities. But I'll tell you, we don't. Even if you make $200,000 a year, you have no idea what it's like to be Mark Zuckerberg. You have no idea what it's like to have everything. Imagine this. I want you to imagine something. Let's say you make $20 an hour, $50. Let's say you make $12 an hour, right? It's such an exponential jump to go to $20 an hour, but you still have bills to pay and worry about, right? Same at $50 an hour. You still have bills to pay. I mean, those bills aren't as pressing as somebody who makes $10 an hour, right? You're not going to lose your house. You'll have somewhere to live always if you make $50 an hour. But imagine making $500 an hour. Imagine making $5,000 an hour, $50,000 an hour. That's the type of money that Mr. Zuckerberg makes. And when you have no worries in life, man, life can be boring. And I think that's something you have to understand. These rich assholes get bored. And some of them are evil, and some of them want power. That's why it's not weird to see this Game of Thrones stuff happening, folks, because Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, all of these guys, all these folks want power, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe they should take a cue from Jeff Bezos and start looking into other roles in their company so they don't get directly blamed for this 20 years from now when people look back and say, what a crazy, crazy time. The world must have gone mad in 2021. All right. Head to the website, www.americanreveille.com. Do me this favor, all right? Hit it up. Hit it up, hit it up, hit it up. If you loved this podcast, if you like what we're doing and you feel like supporting us, hit the support us tab. We take Bitcoin. You can go on PayPal. We take any amount of donation. We appreciate it greatly. Guys, it really helps. It goes a huge way while we're fighting off this censorship. We have some new articles tracing the real pandemic. It's fantastic. And also Andrew Penn put out Joe Biden's America Last Agenda, a great one as well. I have another article coming out tonight too. Folks, sign up for the mailing list. Please, please, please. You don't want to lose touch with what we are doing across this country. And please contact us. If you have any feedback, if there's anything you'd like to ask me, if there's any way you believe you can contribute with any of your skill sets, or if you'd like to start building up an American Reveille street team in your neighborhood, please let me know. JAMESLANE at AmericanReveille.com, JAMESLANE at AmericanReveille.com, or you can hit the contact button or go to AmericanReveille.com and then hit the contact button. Folks, we're still on YouTube, so if that's where you're watching us, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, share. But they are shadow banning us. That's why you'll notice that we were getting thousands of views, and now all of a sudden we're barely getting any. That's called shadow banned, all right? So we're moving a lot of our stuff to Odyssey. This is a great platform, ODYSEE.com, all right? Most of my videos are up there. Most of them are up there. And I like them. I think they're a great platform. They're easy to use. It feels like YouTube. So it could be our version of YouTube. Try it out. ODYSEE.com. I'm there as American_Reveille. Of course, the links will be in the description below. And of course, I'm on Rumble, guys. I am on Rumble as well. Head over to rumble.com. Find me American_Reveille. I'm in the comment section below, or I'm in the description section. You can find the link there. Head over here, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I need all the support I can get. We are having a very big hit to our distribution. People are not seeing what we're putting out because they killed Parler. And like I told you in the podcast episode, we don't even know if Parler is coming back. So we got to start from scratch. So I need your help, folks. Please help. All right. We can do this together. We really, really can. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, guys, 5-star rating, leave a review. Please, 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 please. That's a big deal. Subscribe there. Follow me there. Share. If you are an audio listener, I am on most platforms. American Reveille podcast on most platforms, folks. If you're a listener and you know people who like AM radio and different things like that, tell them about the American Reveille.